Welcome to the His Eternal Word podcast. I am your host, Rakeyia Collins, and the purpose of this podcast is to read the Bible from beginning to end every single year. If that mission sounds interesting to you, I'd encourage you to grab your Bible and read along with me. On today's episode, we are going to be reading Genesis 4 through Genesis 6. So we're going to go ahead and dive in. Genesis 4, Cain and Abel. Now Adam knew Eve, his wife, and conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. And again she bore his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, and Cain a worker of the ground. In the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground, and Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat portions. And the Lord had a regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering he had no regard. So Cain was very angry, and his face fell. The Lord said to Cain, Why are you angry, and why has your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is contrary to you, but you must rule over it. Cain spoke to Abel his brother, and when they were in the field, Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, Where is Abel your brother? He said, I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? And the Lord said, What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground. And now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it shall no longer yield to you its strength. You shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth. Cain said to the Lord, My punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, you have driven me today away from the ground, and from your face I shall be hidden. I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me. Then the Lord said to him, Not so. If anyone kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord put a mark on Cain, lest anyone who find him should attack him. Then Cain went away from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. When he built a city, he called the name of the city after the name of his son, Enoch. To Enoch was born Irad, and Irad fathered Menuel, and Menuel fathered Methuselah, and Methuselah fathered Lamech. And Lamech took 2 wives. The name of the one was Ada, and the name of the other Zillah. Ada bore Jabba. He was the father of those who dwell in tents and have livestock. His brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all those who played the lyre and the pipe. Zillah also bore Tubal Cain. He was the forager of all instruments of bronze and iron. The sister of Tubal Cain was Namal. Lamech said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, Hear my voice, you wives of Lamech. Listen to what I say. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain's revenge is sevenfold, then Lamech's is 77fold. And Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son, and called his name Seth. For she said, God has appointed for me another offspring instead of Abel, for Cain killed him. To Seth also a son was born, and he called his name Enosh. At that time, people began to call upon the name of the Lord. Guys, there's so much in chapter 4 that I want to unpack. And I want to start from the very beginning, because this was when I started to realize that the Bible, the way especially this passage, chapter 4, was written, this is a good example of how the Bible is not written in chronological order in this particular passage. The first thing that I want to note is, if we go back to Cain and Abel, really chapter 4, verse 1, really all the way down to verse 7, where the Bible is just describing Cain and Abel and focuses on their occupations. So we know that Abel is working with the animals in the field. He's a keeper of sheep. And we know that Cain is a worker of the ground. We know also from reading this that Cain is older than Abel. And so it looks like from chapter 4, verse 1, all the way down to chapter 7, what we know for a fact is that they have two different occupations and that Cain is older than Abel. And so I can't speak to their particular relationship, but I can speak to the pressures of today's society when we think about sibling relationships where as the older sibling, you technically feel like, okay, I need to be doing better than you. Like we have this innate urge or need to feel like we are the one that's paving the way for our younger siblings to follow. And here in the word, we see the complete opposite. We see that Abel is not that he's doing better because his occupation is better, but he's doing better because he was able to give an offering or a sacrifice to God that actually met the requirements compared to Cain sticking with his occupation and providing the first fruits of his occupation, which didn't necessarily meet the request of God, which was to give blood. Like as we learned in chapter 3, without the sacrifice of blood, there is no remission of sin, which is why God had to clothe Adam and Eve with the sheepskin or the animal's clothing as loincloths for them to cover them up because they tried to do it with leaves from the ground and that didn't work. So God had to come in and rectify it by actually killing an animal and clothing them with that. And here in chapter 4, we see something similar where Cain is following his father's lead, Adam, and he's just using the fruits from the ground and trying to give that to God when Abel, the younger brother, is actually doing something similar to what God did, which was he's killing an animal and he's offering that as a sacrifice. I mentioned the sibling rivalry earlier because we can see that specifically in verse 7, where this is God speaking to Cain, he says, "Why are you angry and why has your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is contrary to you, but you must rule over it." By the term, because this is the English Standard Version, when it says contrary to you, it has a footnote and it says toward you. So sin is desiring Cain in this particular moment. And so for me, I love that this is included in the word because irrespective of how Cain is perceiving his situation with Abel, God is like, listen, it doesn't matter. If you do well, I will take and be just as happy and just as content. The same way that I am with Abel and Abel's sacrifice. But it could be, again, going back to today's culture where we have this entitled spirit of, I'm the older person, I'm the older sibling, I should be the person that, is paving the way. I shouldn't have to ask my younger siblings for anything. I shouldn't have to. I don't want to say it's beneath you, but it's just a part of being the older one that you feel like you have to set the path and set the way. And it could have been pride that didn't allow Cain to just simply ask Abel. Maybe it's because they have two different occupations and he would have had to learn how to go out and actually kill an animal in order to offer the sacrifice that was necessary to be pleasing in the sight of the Lord. It could have been a mixture of things. But one thing I do know, looking at it from today's perspective, is that if you are a sibling and if you are in a relationship with your siblings and you're the older sibling, don't ever allow your own personal perspective to inhibit you from asking questions and seeking guidance, even if it's from your younger siblings, because it could ultimately help you in the long run. And so the next thing that I wanted to call out was going to be in verse 9, where we drop down a couple verses. And then the Lord said to Cain, "Where is your brother? Where is Abel your brother?" He said, "I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?" Again, am I my brother's keeper? Like, am I responsible for him? Do I need to know where he is? And it's so interesting because at this point, this statement, although we know as readers that Cain in verse 8 rose up and killed his brother. This statement to me is so interesting because it speaks, you can hear the sin speaking in Cain. Am I my brother's keeper? Like, if you did not know where your sibling was, and at this point in the word, we know it is there are limited humans on the planet. We know there's Adam, we know there's Eve, we know there's Cain, we know there's Abel. So it's not as if we're dealing with an entire population of humans, right? So for Cain to come with this demeanor, you can hear the sin speaking. You can hear just that I don't care disposition that came from Cain's voice in that statement. And it just really, for me, reminded me of the importance of our attitudes and our dispositions, because your disposition about something and your attitude about something can speak for you in ways that you can't even imagine. By him making that statement, in my mind, I can almost see the look on his face, like, are you really asking me this? His eyes was probably squinting when he was talking to the Lord, like, really? Did you really just ask me this? And so from that particular verse, I learned, one, right, to make sure I'm literally keeping guard at my disposition and at the way that I choose to maneuver throughout the world, because it's important to know that when you are speaking, not, of course, in this context, Cain is speaking specifically to God, but in general, when we speak to each other as humans, our body language and the words that we use are very imperative, and they could be in alignment or in misalignment. And so always making sure that when we speak and when we open our mouths, we're speaking with love, because this statement is not coming from love. This statement is likely coming from irritation. And two, the fact that we make sure that when we speak to others, we speak to them in a way that shows that we actually care about them. Because in this statement, we can tell that Cain doesn't care. He's like, am I his keeper? Do I really care about where he is? So those are a couple of things that really stood out to me. So if we keep pushing along, in chapter 4, the next thing that really stood out to me was about the way that this particular chapter is structured, because of its literary design, in the sense that it doesn't go in a chronological order, right? From verse 17 all the way down to verse 24, this is intentional. Like, we're stopping the story of Adam, right? We're stopping the story of Adam and Eve and their children. We're going down, I don't want to say a rabbit hole, but we're taking a turn and we're diving deeper into Cain's line, because we know that Cain, at this point in the story, since he's killed his brother, God has given him the punishment of wandering the earth. And because of that punishment of wandering the earth, we now are looking from verse 17 down to 24. We are looking down Cain's family line and seeing what has happened to him down to Lamech. And it's so important to me, because when I tell you guys, this is my second time being intentional about reading the Bible end to end. And I missed this the first time I read Genesis. And I don't even know how I missed it, but I was literally just reading the book. And it wasn't until this time around that I actually saw these verses. And I'm like, from a chronological perspective, it doesn't look like it makes sense that God is talking to Cain, giving him his punishment. Now in 17, all of a sudden, Cain is married. He has a wife. Like, where did his wife come from? And it wasn't until, as we're about to dive into chapter 5, that we'll begin to get into the descendants from Adam all the way down. But this, for me, was very important, because as I was reading through this and studying for this podcast, I was like, this doesn't flow in order. And it took me honestly on a tangent until I began to realize the literary design of this, because it is important that we see Lamech. And we see Lamech's demeanor, his statement that Lamech made in verse 23, where he says to his wives, "Hear my voice, you wives of Lamech, listen to what I say. I've killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me." Verse 24, if Cain's revenge is sevenfold, then Lamech's is 77-fold. So he's taking pride in the fact that his great grandfather it's some more greats in there, but basically in his family line, he's aware of the fact that God sent Cain off to be a wanderer because of his sin. And because Lamech has done something similar, he is basically calling on what was said to Cain from a source of pride. And that, for me, one, speaks to the fact that the things we say and do now will be told by generations that come after us. And they can either take pride in those things and they can be a source of pride, or they can be like this and it shouldn't be a source of pride. Like Lamech should not find pride in this statement because of what happened, right? Like you're making this statement because someone in your family line killed their brother. Like that's why you're making this statement. This statement shouldn't come from a place of, ooh, look at me. But we can see, and you can almost read the pride in this voice when he tells his wives, hear my voice, you wives, listen to what I say. Like you can feel the pride in his voice. And this is not a statement of pride. So I think that's partially why this was put in here and why, because if you look at, 17 through 24, it is truly focusing on Cain. And in 25, we go back to Adam. We go back to the original storyline. And so it was put in here for a reason, for us to kind of look at Cain's genealogy and then the specific call out about Lamech and about Lamech's attitude and about Lamech's demeanor. And so I would encourage you that what you do, the attitude that you have, your disposition, you're cognizant of how that is going to impact generations after you. And then the other item that I wanted to talk through was really when we think about Cain's punishment, and this is going to go back a little bit. This is going to go back up in chapter 4 to verse 13, where we see that Cain says to the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, you have driven me today from the ground, and from your face I shall be hidden. It is the fact that Cain recognizes that he is being driven from the face of God. He is being driven, like he's being pushed out. And because he's being pushed out, he describes himself as a refugee and a wanderer, because when you are in the presence of the Lord, this is God. God is love. This is the creator of the world. And so if we were to look at this from Cain's perspective, again, at this point, it's just Adam, Eve, Cain, not even Abel anymore. And so God is really all that Cain knows. And so to imagine the fact that it's just you three, Cain is saying the punishment is greater than I can bear because now I have to leave from your face. I'm going to be a wanderer and a refugee. That's what it is for me. I'm going to be a wanderer and a refugee. There is no other there is nothing greater than that for me. And if someone finds me, they're going to kill me. It's heartbreaking. And that's really why I wanted to circle back up to verse 13, because you can hear in this statement that Cain realizes the magnitude of the decision he made after the decision was made, that the consequence of this decision of being driven away from the face of God, it's something more than he can afford to bear. And it's heartbreaking because it's too late at that point. There are certain things we do as humans that the consequence is the consequence and you can't go back from it. So moving forward, because we spent enough time in chapter 4. So moving forward to chapter 5, Adam's descendants to Noah. This is the book of the generations of Adam. When God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. Male and female, he created them. And he blessed them and named them man when they were created. When Adam had lived 130 years, he fathered a son in his own likeness after his image and named him Seth. The days of Adam after he fathered Seth were 800 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Thus, all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. When Seth had lived 105 years, he fathered Enosh. Seth lived after he fathered Enosh 807 years, and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Seth were 912 years, and he died. When Enosh had lived 90 years, he fathered Kenan. Enosh lived after he fathered Kenan 815 years, and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Enosh were 905 years, and he died. When Canaan had lived 70 years, he fathered Malahiel. Canaan lived after he fathered Malahiel 840 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Canaan were 910 years, and he died. When Malahiel lived 65 years, he fathered Jared. Malahiel lived after he fathered Jared 830 years, and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Malahiel were 895 years, and he died. When Jared had lived 162 years, he fathered Enoch. Jared lived after he fathered Enoch 800 years, and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Jared were 962 years, and he died. When Enoch had lived 65 years, he fathered Methuselah. Enoch walked with God after he fathered Methuselah 300 years, and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Enoch were 365 years. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. When Methuselah had lived 187 years, he fathered Lamech. Methuselah lived after he fathered Lamech 782 years, and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Methuselah were 969 years, and he died. When Lamech had lived 182 years, he fathered a son, and called his name Noah, saying, Out of the ground that the Lord has cursed, this one shall bring us relief from the work and from the painful toil of our hands. Lamech lived after he fathered Noah 595 years, and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Lamech were 777 years, and he died. After Noah was 500 years old, Noah fathered Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So in chapter 5, the biggest thing that I wanted to call out is that back in verse 2, chapter 5, it says, male and female, he created them, and he blessed them and named them man when they were created. I love that. Because if you've read or listened to any sermon up until this point in your life, then you know that the word man is used a lot in the Bible. Here we see a clear call out that male and female, he created them, and he blessed them and named them man. Man is referring to the spirit that lives in us. I was first, after reading this in the Bible, it makes sense, but genuinely, I was first introduced to this concept by Dr. Miles Monroe. If you've never heard of Dr. Miles Monroe, I would encourage you to look up his Kingdom Series sermon on YouTube. I think he does a phenomenal job of really breaking down the Bible, its purpose, its intent, and its goal. And one of the things that he speaks about is the fact that our spirits that live in us, male and female, are called man. And so when people try to, look at the Bible and it always speaks to man, make sure that you're looking at the context in which it's using the word man, because it could be truly referring to like the male figure, or it could be referring to man, that spirit that lives in all of us. And so if you look at it, at least in the English Standard Version that I'm reading, man has a footnote by it, and that footnote means Adam. And so man doesn't even really mean man the way that we look at it, like man, woman. It really means Adam, which is the Adamic race. That's what God created, that spirit that lives in all of us. And so that was all of my commentary for chapter 5. I know that we spent a lot of time going through in chapter 5, the genealogy from Adam all the way down. And this is why, going back to just some slight commentary from chapter 4, this is where you can see that, okay, this is where Cain's wife would have came from, right? Had we known that Adam lived 800 years and they kept producing kids and kept having offspring, at this point, we're creating the population. And so this is where we would have gotten Cain's wife, and Cain, again, he was wandering throughout the earth. And so as Cain is wandering for all these years, Adam and Eve are still married and still doing what they do as married people. And so to me, 4 and 5 together, I never looked at it from this perspective, but to me, 4 and 5, when you read them together in the appropriate context, they make sense in terms of why things were written the way that they were written. And so on to chapter 6, increasing corruption on earth. When man began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took their wives as they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterwards when the sons of God came in the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. The Lord saw the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out man, whom I have created from the face of the land, man and animals and creeping things and the birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Noah and the flood. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God, and Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. And God saw the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. And God said to Noah, I have determined to make an end to all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence through them. Behold, I will destroy them from the earth. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Make rooms in the ark and cover it inside and out with pitch. This is how you are to make it. The length of the ark 300 cubits, its breadth 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits. Make a roof for the ark, and finish it to a cubit above, and set the door of the ark on its side. Make it with lower, second, and third decks. For behold, I will bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, in which is the breath of life under heaven. Everything that is on the earth shall die. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall be But I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall come into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you, and of every living thing of all flesh, you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female, of the birds according to their kinds, and of the animals according to their kinds, of every creeping thing of the ground according to its kind. 2 of every sort shall come into you, and keep it of the birds according to their kinds, and of the animals according to their kinds, of every creeping thing of the ground according to its kind. 2 of every sort shall come into you to keep them alive. Also, take with you every sort of food that is eaten and store it up. It shall serve as food for you and for them. Noah did this. He did all that God commanded him. So, chapter 6, a few major call-outs that I wanted to make. First is that if we go to chapter 6 and we go to verse 5, it says, the Lord saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. This, for me, if you think evil thoughts and you wonder, especially if the thoughts that you think are very contrary to you and you're like, where do they come from? This gave me the knowledge I needed to know that every intention of the thoughts of his heart are only evil continually. You have to fight. You have to be intentional about wanting to do good, about wanting to think good. It's not our nature. By the corruption that came from what we've read so far from Adam, we're born with the evil thoughts. We have to teach a child to lie. You don't have to teach a child to not tell the truth. Like, your child can live in a great home. Your child can be 2 or 3 and they start to lie. Like, they start to just not tell the truth. They don't want to be caught not being their best self, so they'd rather not tell the truth, right? They don't want to get in trouble. Like, it can be a slew of things, but I mentioned children to say, you can tell from if you grew up in a house with a child or you have children, you don't have to teach them to be bad. It's something that is inherent in the fallen nature of man. And so allow that to be, I'd say, comforting to you, because you know that if this is the base nature, I'm going to have to fight to go the other way. I'm going to have to fight in order to think positive thoughts. I'm going to have to be focusing on God. I'm going to have to be focusing on His word, on His will, on His way. And I'm going to have to be intentional about that. And why that's so important is because I don't want you to think that there's something inherently wrong with you. There's nothing inherently wrong with you other than the fact that we were born in a fallen world. Because we're born in this fallen world, we have to fight to change our base nature. And for me, it was personally very comforting, because it's like you wonder where these randomly bad thoughts, like, where are they coming from? Why are they here? It has nothing to do with you. Everything to do with the fact that you have to be intentional about changing your thoughts, about changing what goes in your mind and what your mind continues to play over and over and over again. And what I found is, because of the power of neuroplasticity, which, if you've never heard of that word, you don't know what it means. Long story short, neuroplasticity is the ability to rewire our brains and to, over time, allow our brains to build new connections and really think things differently. And so the same way you can build habits, the same way you can build muscles, your brain can be built and changed to think different thoughts. And so the more you focus on the Word of God, the more you expose yourself to positive things that are in the Word, the more you surround yourself with love and joy and peace and kindness and the fruits of the Spirit, you are going to begin to see that manifest in your life, because that is what your mind is meditating on. Dropping down a few verses, I want to go to verse 8. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. I want to read verse 8 in conjunction with verse 7 again, because it's so powerful to me. So starting at verse 7, so the Lord said, I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the land, man and animals and creeping things and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry I made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. I love verse 8. And I love that verse 8 is constructed in the English language to start off with the word but. Because in verse 7, we can feel by the words that are on the page the level of grief that was going on in the heart of God at this time. And again, I use heart. I know that that's a human term, but bear with me, guys. That's all we have to deal with is the English language. I love the fact that it says, but, because once you see and you feel that grief that he regretted, literally, if we think about what's happened up until this point, we have this perfect world that fell short, that a brother killed a brother. Like, you have now in chapter 6, you have sons of God who are sleeping with women, and they're bringing about these Nephilim. God is just, okay, I'm done. I'm fed up. But Noah, I just want in my life personally to be in a space where God can see the world and he says, but Rakeyia, insert your name, right? To know that everything in the world could be going on, but Rakeyia decided that she was going to, step out and talk to people about God, right? Everything, people are, worshiping different gods and they're doing their own things. But this person decided that they were going to go out in their community and they were going to speak about God to people, or they were going to go out and they were going to help the poor or give back. Those are the types of things that I would want to be literally the hallmarks of my life. as it relates to my life in God. We know, if I'm sure all of us have read at least portions of the Bible, if we've never read it all the way through, and we know that God is going to judge us based on our deeds. And so that's why, to me, having read the Bible and reading it again this time, seeing things like, but Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord, is such a big deal. It is an incredibly big deal, because but Noah, but all of these things are going wrong. Even if we look at it in 2023, all of these things in the world are going wrong. But insert your name there, found favor in the eyes of the Lord. He found favor not because Noah was Noah, but because of his heart posture, right? Because there was something about Noah that was receptive and that was good in the eyes of the Lord. That was something that, if we go back up to verse 5, Noah was different, right? Noah's thoughts could not be intentionally on evil and doing evil at all times. And so this is why I personally, from verse 5 to verse 8, love this, because it really allows us to see that you can change. You can change your thoughts. You can change your mind. You can change your actions. You have the ability to change. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I hope that you found some value out of this content. If you did, please leave me a rating or review wherever you are listening. This would mean the world to me. I'd also love to hear from you on social media. Please feel free to reach out on Twitter at His Eternal Word, the number 1. And also please feel free to reach out to me on Instagram as well at His Eternal Word. Visit our website at www.hiseternalword.com, and I hope you stay tuned for the next episode.